Well, a lot of people ask if abuse is only physical, but abuse and domestic violence can be sexual, it can be emotional, it can be psychological, and it can be verbal. So physical abuse, that's a myth that physical abuse is the only form of abuse. Another myth about domestic violence, she could just leave if she wanted to. I hear that a bazillion times a day. Most victims are too scared to physically and emotionally to leave. They may be physically isolated, they can be fear of losing their children, they could be in fear of losing their job, having financial support cut off, and sometimes they're just culturally prohibited from leaving or seeking help. Myth about domestic violence is that abuse is caused by drugs or alcohol or mental illness. Be clear, these situations can exacerbate an already violent situation, but they do not cause it. Another myth is that people think that the person who's being abused could do something to prevent it, and that is the farthest thing from the truth. This implies that the victim has some control over the situation, when in fact it is the abuser who has all of the control. And that's exactly what they want, to exert power and control over another person. Here's another big one, and unfortunately, a lot of couples will move into this in a violent situation, and it's not the answer. The myth about anger management and marriage counseling, not only is it a myth, it can also be dangerous. It's misleading. It can be dangerous because it places partial responsibility on the victim, and then we're shifting it from the perpetrator. So it's sort of victim blaming too, and you don't want them together in a counseling session. There's a lot of big myths. There's a lot of them to dispel. The most common myth is, why doesn't she just leave? And that's the myth that we struggle with, and we get that question a bazillion times a day. And the fact of the matter is, victims of domestic violence can't just leave. They have to escape, and they have to do it safely. And sometimes even staying in their home is part of the safety plan, because you have to get into the mind of your abuser. And nobody knows their abuser more than the person being abused. So even though that sounds a little strange, like part of her safety plan is to stay, well, that's part of the planning too. You have to methodically and creatively craft a way to get out and stay safe if you want to end the relationship. So not only is it a myth that she can't just leave because she's usually isolated, she's in fear, she's been threatened, so those are a lot of reasons why she can't leave, but they have so much power and control, they just keep them in this state of fear. And a lot of victims of domestic violence like me, they didn't know they were a victim of domestic violence. Why should I leave? It's not I don't want to get divorced, I don't want to leave, I want him to stop what he's doing. And that's what people aren't doing. They're not taking, they're keeping the focus on the victims, and what they really need to be doing is shifting that focus to the perpetrator. Why does he behave that way? Why is he doing those things?